Hello YouTube, Active Asshole on Roids here with the continuation of my How I Became a Social Democrat series. Before I get started, just want to go ahead and direct you all to my new baby here. Let me pick the little, oh man, just look at that beautiful thing there. Yeah, $200 that baby put me down. And then I had to buy another bar for it, another Olympic bar. Oh man, because this thing wasn't compatible with my standard bar, which is leaning against the wall over there. Yeah, I know I suck at camera. Can't at cinematography. Bite me. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go to Walmart and buy a few weights for this thing soon. It's my daughter. As one ancient English king said about his castle, I believe it was King Richard I, because he spent shitloads of money on building castles in the old Norman style. But I'm going to say right here and now that this is going to be probably my most. This video is going to describe the low point in my transformation. That is the impact that racism had on my teen years. And I'm examining this like every other element in my development separately. And I'm going to start by saying that I'm not proud of some of the things I'm going to be admitting to in this video. I'm not. Let's say I'm not. I wasn't. I was a really troubled kid coming up. I had a lot of mental issues. Still have a lot of mental issues. But at least I'm brave enough to say it and just get it out of the way. I'm not trying to hide it. All right, I'm not trying to hide the fact that I have a couple of mental disorders, but these do not excuse this particular aspect of my teen years, which largely built on my upbringing before I actually started to think about things as I got older. I was a flaming racist when I was a kid. Or at least I thought I was. And this racism intensified as I got older into my mid-teen years, and eventually I threw it under a bus because I realized it was wrong. But when you're that young, you parrot a lot of the things your old man said. Your parents say. And even though my mother wasn't as bad as my father was, she had her moments where she blamed black people just as much as my father did. My father looked at black people, at black Americans, the same way that the Nazis looked at Jews. He saw them as the root of all evil, as the reason why society was falling into degradation, why there was crime in the cities, and why white girls were turning into whores, and well, he believed that white girls in general were turning into whores, and all that stuff. And he blamed it on blacks and all that. And he invented all kinds of conspiracy theories about black people dominating the government and having the president and the Congress by the balls. He was a special brand of racist crazy, even before he retooled himself like the rest of the right-wingers did and became more of a religious sectarian crazy later on when it became unpopular to demonize black people. Now, later on, I tried to work with this man after I had my own awakening, after I worked hard to reform myself from my own racist upbringing. I tried to bring this guy back to sanity and get him to not be racist, and it almost worked. But then as soon as Barack Obama got elected, started leading in the polls and won the Democratic primary back in 2008, and then won the presidency, he went right back into, well, maybe that damn nigger will get shot. No, nigger this, nigger that, nigger. I tried. I really tried, and I thought I was going to have a breakthrough myself, but it only had the two consequences only came out of my active efforts to try to change this piece of shit. he went right back into it, even harder than he was before, probably out of reaction. And two, he started incorporating people from my group in society, my liberals, socialists, and atheists into his targeted targeted audiences for his particular brand of hate. So, and I was still living with him, so I had to put up with it. But I was honest with him about what I was, and I told him that I thought he was wearing his religion on his sleeve as just another weapon to help push his own hateful agenda. And then he drew a flathead screwdriver back and tried to stab me with it, and I snapped and I almost killed the man when I grabbed and lifted him off the ground and hurled him into a car. And then I picked him off the ground again and slung all 185 pounds of him right into the side of the house. He bounced about 10, 15 feet and landed on his face in the backyard. Needless to say, it was the last time he ever tried anything physical with me. Note to any parents out there, if you're a bigoted asshole and your kid works out like a motherfucker and is already 24 years old, it's not a good idea to get violent, racist, and bigoted with your kid just because you disagree with them, because your kid might tear your face off. And I have no regrets. The only reason I had regrets about it at first was because I lowered myself down to his level, but I did it in self-defense because he was a fucknut, and he deserved what he got, especially considering the fact that he admitted to killing an old black man with chains back when he was in the Ku Klux Klan and was later outed to be a child molester. He served 4 years in prison for that. I don't regret doing what I did to him. The guy was a scumbag. He really was. And based on what my siblings told me, one of my older half-sisters had to be sent to California because my mother was afraid my father was going to go back to prison for child molestation charges. My brother, who was in the Marines, came home and caught him on top of her and beat the living crap out of him. I think every single kid, every single male member of my family, every single male in-law, male relative on my mother's side, every single one of us have had our turn beating the living shit out of my racist dad. Well, what can I say? He's a piece of shit, and he brings it on himself every time he pops his mouth off or tries to go for his gun. He's a very unstable man, and that's probably the reason why he lives out in the middle of nowhere with just other relatives who will vouch for him, just so he can stay out of trouble with the law because he doesn't want to go back to prison. He's a mouse when he confronts people that aren't his relatives. That being said, let me get back on track here, back on the topic. Well, when I was younger, again, under the influence of my father, I said a lot of horrible things. I even openly, when I was a younger teenager, I even openly called for genocide against black men. I was a horrible, racist little bastard. I was like an Eric Cartman, and my own little victim mentality was almost as bad as my old man's. Once I got older and I started realizing where my problems were, what kind of an influence my father was on me, and once I realized that, hey, black people have never done anything to you, and so why do you hate them so much? I started connecting the dots. I started realizing that I was turning into an evil piece of shit myself, and even today I'm a very vengeful little fucker when it comes to getting screwed over by people. I can't blame that on my father, though. That's just something that I have to live with because it's up here. It's up here. This drive to have to get even with people when they fuck with me. Hell, I'll even admit that back when I was in college and and I was dealing with this other asshole who was a complete piece of shit that I actively tried to catch this asshole alone just to beat the shit out of him because he was always starting shit with me when we were around other people. I actively tried to find a way to get this guy away from any kind of surveillance cameras or crowds just so I could have some words with him. And I was a social democrat by then, so again, my immaturity, my asshole behavior, I admit that, and I wanted to apologize to him for that, which is why I actually walked up to him after the Ralph Nader conference at Jacksonville State in April of 2010. But you already know how that turned out. But you know, I took African American literature at Jacksonville State University so that I could actually learn a little bit more about history, about the history of the struggles of black Americans, of African Americans. I don't know. Sometimes people who are Black American, you know, who are in that demographic, they tend. I've had them get upset when I call them African Americans and say, "I'm not from Africa. I'm black." So you know, I just try to use them interchangeably, just so I won't offend them too much, because you know some of them really do get pretty sensitive about what term you use to describe them, whether it's Afro-American or African American. So you know, now I don't even bring up the race issue unless of course it gives me a chance to talk about politics a little bit with my coworkers. I don't even bring up the race issue, but I was on my way to being a scumbag, and I guess one could say that this is a redemption story. And on the right, I've noticed that when one of theirs has a redemption story, like Mike Huckabee, where you know he loses a shitload of weight and comes back and everything, and you know they buy into that when it's one of theirs. But when your redemption story leads you to the exact opposite beliefs, to the exact opposite conclusions, nothing but snide troll comments from the right or crickets. But when I was 6 years old, I even called a black kid on the bus a nigger. I was bad. I was fucking horrible because, you know, that's what I grew up around. Not just my old man, but all of his male relatives on his side of the family were a bunch of neo-Confederate flag-flying crazies who bought into the whole "the South shall rise again" bullshit just as much as he did. Of course, they never really acted out these fantasies in the way he did. So, I'm genuinely sorry about what I did. You know, about the way I was when I was a teenager and the way I was going up into my late teens. I'm genuinely sorry about that, and I've worked to put that behind me and just try to give back to society in some way, being, you know, trying to be kind, trying to show some humanity that I didn't show when I was a kid. And I was a stupid little kid. I was stupid because, you know, I went right, even after I stopped being a racist asshole, I still bought into the whole Austrian economics crap, the whole libertarian movement, libertarian party crap as soon as I got to my second semester in college, just like a lot of these Ayn Rand droid-loving pieces of garbage who are social Darwinistic. And even today, I have a hard time looking at my coworkers who are predominantly black at work, because I have my, you know, I still think back to the way I was, and it sort of makes me, I feel really fucking guilty about the way I acted and the way I just, and I had an irrational fear of black people, like they were gonna bounce me. You know, I had the white flight syndrome on a micro level when I was in grade school and when I was in junior high, and it's just horrible. And the only thing I can really say now is that I'm sorry. And you know, after I got into Jacksonville State University, I also joined the NAACP and was a card carrying member for a few years. I need to renew my membership at some point. Oh. And I've become a avid supporter of pluralist democracy, both financial and civil in nature. And I promise that I will never go back to being a racist asshole again. Because I'm not going to let the faults of the father become the faults of the, I don't even want to call myself a son, I'm just going to say spawn. You know, try to distance myself from that piece of shit as much as I can. I really hope his death is slow and painful. My mother, she was a relatively good person. In spite of her flaws, she was a nice human being and everything, and she genuinely cared about other people. But she died a very slow, agonizing death. And even though I know it's a sin, I don't really believe in religion, so I can't really say sin. Even though it's wrong to wish bad things on another person, personally, there's a small part of me that hopes that my old man's death is far more slow and painful. We're talking dying over a period of 6 months in agony, because my mother wound up having to die over a period of 2.5 months in agony before she finally gave out and passed from and died. You know, it's just. But again, that's probably just the remnant of me being horrible, a horrible person. But renouncing racism was just one step. Renouncing the social Darwinism was just one step in becoming a social democracy advocate down the road. Again, this is Active Asshole on Roids. Peace out.